Right now, something just broke inside NATO, and almost nobody realizes how serious it actually is. For 75 years, one simple promise held the West together. America protects everyone. That promise wasn't symbolic. It was backed by overwhelming military power and thousands of nuclear weapons. It meant that if you lived in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or anywhere across Europe, you were protected by a system designed to prevent war before it even started. That system created stability, economic growth, and decades of relative peace. But this week, that promise didn't just weaken. It cracked in a way we haven't seen in modern history. Donald Trump publicly called key allies cowards, refused to support them in securing the Strait of Hormuz during rising tensions with Iran, and then delivered a message that sent a clear signal to governments across the world. We will remember. That single moment may end up being far more important than it looks right now. Because what followed didn't happen loudly, it happened quietly, strategically, and very fast. Within days, countries that had depended on the United States for generations began preparing for something unthinkable just a few years ago, a future where America might not show up. And this is where the story shifts from politics to something much deeper. Because NATO was never just an alliance on paper, it was built on fear, trust, and nuclear deterrence. In 1949, after the devastation of World War II, 12 nations came together to form NATO around one brutal but effective rule: attack one and all respond. And behind that rule was one unspoken reality. If things escalated, the United States would be the ultimate shield, even if it meant nuclear retaliation. That guarantee is the reason most of Europe never developed large-scale nuclear arsenals of their own. They didn't need to. The American umbrella made it unnecessary, and for decades that system worked almost perfectly. But the real test of that alliance didn't come during the Cold War. It came after 9/11. When the United States was attacked, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in its history. And allies didn't hesitate. They deployed troops to Afghanistan, fought alongside American forces, and took heavy losses. More than 3,500 non-US coalition soldiers were killed, 457 from the UK, 158 from Canada, 86 from France, 62 from Germany, 53 from Italy, 44 from Poland, 43 from Denmark, and others. These weren't just numbers, they were proof that the alliance wasn't one-sided. When America needed help, its allies showed up, paid the price, and proved that the system worked. But here's the uncomfortable reality. This entire structure depended on one core belief: that the United States would always do the same in return. And now, for the first time in decades, that belief is being openly questioned. In March 2026, tensions around Iran escalated rapidly, especially near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical oil choke points in the world. A significant portion of global energy supply flows through that narrow passage, so any disruption instantly impacts global markets. As tensions rose, oil prices surged, investors reacted, and the risk of a broader conflict became real. The United States pushed its allies to step in with military support: ships, aircraft, presence. But several countries hesitated. Not because they didn't care, but because the situation carried massive risk, and there had been little coordination. And instead of quiet diplomacy behind closed doors, the disagreement became public. Statements were made, pressure increased, and suddenly what should have been a strategic discussion turned into a visible fracture. But that's not even the most important part of this story. Because while public attention was focused on political statements and headlines, a much deeper shift was already underway behind the scenes. Emmanuel Macron stepped forward with a move that caught many analysts off guard. France, now the only nuclear power within the European Union, began positioning itself as a central pillar of European defence in a way not seen since the Cold War. Discussions intensified around extending French nuclear deterrence beyond its own borders. This wasn't just political messaging, it involved real military capability, warheads, advanced delivery systems, and the possibility of deployment strategies that could place French deterrence at the core of a new European security structure. And once that conversation started, it spread quickly. Germany, Europe's largest economy and a key NATO member, began exploring alternative frameworks alongside its existing arrangements. Poland, located on NATO's eastern edge and facing direct geopolitical pressure, pushed for stronger and faster deterrence measures. Countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Greece, and Denmark all signaled interest in deeper coordination. Even traditionally stable alliances began to show signs of reassessment. Denmark, long considered one of America's closest partners, started re-evaluating its strategic posture amid rising tensions in the Arctic and renewed focus on Greenland. Canada, which shares the longest undefended border in the world with the United States, has also begun to see public discussions emerge about long-term security dependence and whether diversification is necessary. And this is where the real shift becomes clear, because once countries begin asking these questions, the system has already changed. This is no longer about a single disagreement or a temporary political moment, it's about trust. And trust, once weakened inside an alliance like NATO, doesn't simply return to normal. It creates ripple effects across military planning, economic decisions, and long-term strategy. Markets have already started reacting. Oil prices have shown volatility, defense spending is rising across multiple regions, and governments are reassessing risk at a level not seen in years. Because if NATO begins to weaken, even slightly, the balance of power that has defined the global order for decades begins to shift with it. And history has shown repeatedly that when alliances lose clarity, uncertainty grows and instability follows. During the Cold War, global stability depended on clear lines. Everyone understood who would respond and how far they would go. That clarity acted as a deterrent in itself. Today, those lines are starting to blur. And when clarity disappears, miscalculation becomes more likely. That's the real risk. Because this isn't just about one statement, one policy decision, or one leader. It's about whether the foundation that has supported global stability for generations can continue to hold under pressure. From this point forward, there are only a few realistic paths. NATO could gradually weaken as countries hedge their positions and build alternative structures. Europe could strengthen its own independent defense system, potentially centered around France's nuclear capabilities. Or the United States could attempt to rebuild confidence and reaffirm its commitments, but once doubt becomes public and visible, restoring trust is far more difficult than maintaining it in the first place. And this is the moment that may define the next phase of global politics. Because for the first time in modern history, America's allies are not just quietly questioning its reliability, they are actively preparing for a future where that reliability may no longer be guaranteed. The system that protected millions of people for decades hasn't collapsed, but it is no longer unquestioned. And once that certainty is gone, everything else begins to shift. Strategies, alliances, markets, and decisions. The only question now is how far this shift goes, how quickly it accelerates, and whether the alliance that once defined global stability can adapt in time to survive what comes next. If you found this video helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating content like this.